We've talked about what I got right in the preseason, so now let's have a look at what went wrong. I'm looking at you, Jordan Poole.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I'm planning on filing a grievance over the filing of grievances. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available on all platforms. Double bang it, thumb it up. DB squad is here. And if you are in the DB squad, you can just drop a DB down in the comments as well. Like I said, the last two shows, we've been looking at the players that I was right on. And again, this is about, some of it is self-reflection for me, but it's about you understanding my thoughts and how we adjust as we move forward and understanding the valuations of players and all that sort of stuff. Everything that we do has to have some level of reflection, and it's important to know what it did, but also what that means for the future. You know, I tend to look at a lot of what we do, and this is also true in life, as a way to look forward, right? There's no point saying, well, I screwed that up. Cool, you did. But who cares, right? Figure out why you did it. Was that in your control? What do you do in the future? And what does that mean as we move forward? When you look at someone like, let's say, Jabari Walker playing 40 minutes a night for the last 4 weeks of the season, that's great and all, but does it actually mean anything moving forward? Like, no, of course it doesn't. I'd even suggest, like, the performance of the Bulls guards, of DeSumo or Caruso or White. Does that mean anything? Well, not really, because Lonzo and LaVine missed all season, basically. So who knows? It's about, that happened, that's great, but what does it do? What does it mean? How do we look at it as we move forward? So, in this show, I'm going to look at the blokes that I was higher on than the Yahoo ADP numbers that did not work out, that ended up being bad. Now, in the last two shows prior to this, I went through a bunch of guys that I was higher on that worked and lower on that worked. And I went through and went back and looked at my methodology. I realized there was about 40 guys, I reckon, that fit my criteria that I didn't even mention. I'm not going to go through them all now, but there were a lot more. Towns, Edwards, Vooch, I can't remember the others. So there was a massive list of guys that my formula had missed out on looking at in terms of guys I got right or wrong, which is fine. We're going to look in, and I was surprised. I always thought I was going to get into this and go, okay, we're going to have a large number of wrongs. We're going to have a solid number of rights, but the number of right ones actually dwarf the number of wrongs, which is always where I want to be. So that's a positive for me. It's also some of these ones that I'm going to talk about today. I was like, did I have this guy here? That's a little bit weird, but it is what it is because I took that snapshot at the end of the preseason to look at where I had these guys ranked using my projections and my -1, not looking at the value of, or am I worried about the risk of this guy or playoff schedule or anything like that, just purely the projection numbers, which again I think is probably the more important part of it. Then you tweak the extra nuanced stuff on top of it when you get into actual draft scenarios. I hope all of that makes sense. Because you would see when we get to at least one of these guys that we're going to talk about in this show today, that the per game projected numbers doesn't really reflect where you would take him, but it is important to know that you still got that wildly wrong. Cool. So we're going to start where else do we start? We have to start with this joker. Jordan Poole. What an absolute disaster scenario. I have talked about why I got this wrong so many times already. It was very obvious to me it's obvious to me now why I got it wrong. Well, actually, that's not true. It's obvious to me why I projected him how I did. I had him as 24th in -1 preseason rankings, which is terrible. Now, I would never have, again, that's where the nuance comes in. I never would have taken Jordan Poole at 24, 30, 35, 36, absolutely I would have grabbed him there. 24, never would have. But when I looked at the projections, that's where it came out. He did end up 94th. in -1 end of season rankings. He was a top 50 player over the last 4 weeks of the season, I believe. So pretty strong there. His ADP on Yahoo was 48. His fantasy points was 29 fantasy points, ranking him 98th. Again, much better over the course of the season. But why I got it wrong? Very easy. I expected he would play more minutes than he did in Golden State. I expected he would have more usage on a team that didn't have Steph Curry, Andrew Wiggins, and Klay Thompson. I expected that he would do more point guard stuff, and I understood that he would be bad at shooting. I understood all that, but he played fewer minutes. He had the same or lower usage. The assists didn't really climb. He just was a way worse version of the sixth man version that he was in Golden State, which made no sense to me considering he was starting and is supposed to be the key part of what they were doing in terms of rebuilding. And that didn't work out. He didn't care. He was frozen out either deliberately by him or the coaching staff. They just didn't give him the ball, and it just couldn't have gone worse. But again, the glimpses were there. The last 4 weeks of the season, this is what I thought we would get from Poole. The guy who'd play 34 minutes a night, handle the ball. So this is when Tyus Jones went out. Handle the ball, take a lot of shots, be bad defensively, but put up numbers. Just didn't happen. So he was terrible. It was a terrible, terrible projection. Again, the reasons for it are very clear. And I think if I had to do it again, obviously if it was Jordan Poole, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. But we've also seen Jordan Poole do this before. We had seen him put up big numbers before in the season where Steph and Klay were out. He did this. He was put into a starting role. His minutes went up. His usage went up. He scored well. He got good assists. It was all good. That's why I got it wrong. I got it wrong. And then we see what we do from here on out. And I guess his little renaissance at the end of the season makes next season even more confusing. But we still need to see a lot of what goes on with that Wizards team before we get massively wrapped up in the values that we're going to find there. Another one, which was really interesting, is Onyeka Okongwu. There are going to be people who, happens all the time, they'll misinterpret my opinions on a player or my rankings. I saw someone write somewhere, Josh had Okongwu 30th, which is just blatantly false. I literally never had that. Or maybe you look at rankings in a way that is flawed. That's on you. I would never have suggested that. And every single season prior to this, when I've pushed back on the idea that A, the Hawks would trade Capella, or B, the Hawks would push Okongwu over Capella, I push back on it every year. This year, after talking to people, looking at where these guys are and where the team is, I thought there was a chance that we would get, maybe not Okongwu starting over Capella, but A, Capella could get traded, or B, we would get a minute split. And I only projected, I had him 72nd Okongwu, -1. I only projected him for 25 minutes a night. So that's basically a minute split with some opportunity to start or close games over Capella in there. And I don't think that's an outrageous minutes projection for Okongwu. The problem is that, his minutes, what did he average? 25.5. So I was literally bang on in terms of projecting his minutes, super bang on. The problem is that his block rate just disappeared. He was a very good shot blocker. He averaged 1 block a game. He averaged half a steal. He shot 61 from the field with 10 points and 7 rebounds. Everything just disappeared. All of his rate numbers, which had been strong all through his career, even in 23 minutes, just fell off completely. It was bad. And then Capella got hurt. Okongwu started, and he was a top 30 player. Went, okay, this is exactly why. Because there was always that chance of getting Okongwu, if he found a starting job, that he would blow up. And then he got hurt, and we never saw him again. He finished 130th end of season. Again, when you project the minutes exactly right, and he still misses by 60 spots, there is a huge failure in his overall level of production. His ADP on Yahoo was 104th, which I think was a reasonable spot to take him. I look back and see me having him 72nd. I go, did I actually have him that high? And that's why I went to look to see, how many minutes did I think he was going to get? I didn't actually project him as a starter, did I? No, I didn't. I had him at 25 minutes, and I had Capella at 26. But it just didn't work. 24 fantasy points for Okongwu. That landed him 145th. Now, again, we're going to be in a very similar boat next season. And everyone is going to swear off Okongwu. And if Capella is traded and Okongwu is the starter, I will be back in again, and I will happily take him at 72, 65, whatever. But the troubling thing was the production all dropped for him. And that's the worrying sign. Although, again, when you saw him starting at the end of the year, he went absolutely bananas. The other interesting thing is at the end of the season before, once Quinn Snyder took over, yes, he played like 19 minutes a night. His minutes got reduced, but all of his per minute numbers in Snyder's scheme went through the roof. So, all right, look, if he's going to do this is amazing. He's really fitting under Quinn. Quinn must like what's happening. Maybe we get the chance of more minutes, but no, everything went terrible, even though the minutes were up, and it just didn't work out, and that happens. Unfortunately, it happens. Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Mother's Day is coming up. Yes, Mother's Day is coming up. We have different Mother's Day and Father's Day sometimes here in Australia, but our Mother's Day is the same as you in the United States. So it's coming up in like a couple of weeks. So you got to make sure you're getting the right stuff for your mum because you want to make sure you hit that, you nail that that Mother's Day present. You want to make your mum smile. You want to get those flowers or the gift that she wants from the brands that she loves, and you get that delivered the very same day with DoorDash. Maybe your mum likes gadgets. Maybe she's got a sweet tooth and loves high-end chocolates. Maybe she just wants flowers and the floral scents permeating through her home. Well, with DoorDash, you can get those things delivered the very same day straight to you or straight to her if you want to do it. Hey, mum, here you go. Straight to you. Everything coming straight for Mother's Day. And with a Dash Pass membership, you will save you'll save with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees on eligible orders from Dash Pass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees, including service fees, apply. Terms also apply. So get a Mother's Day gift as unique as she is with DoorDash. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now on DoorDash. That is LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. I cannot stop playing Monopoly Go. This is like legit, every day I wake up, I get like the little notification, hey, someone tried to steal your money. Get out of my bank. Stop stealing my money. That's what happens on Monopoly Go. You know the classic Monopoly Go board game? Well, this is a fast-paced mobile version that you can play with or against your friends. Things move super fast. You can go into their bank. You do the bank heist. You can tear down buildings on their board. You can have these boards set up in many different things, many different areas. Vegas, Paris, London, then like Wild West, tech, billionaire offices, whatever. Monopoly boards in all these different spots. Fast-paced. You love that competitiveness that goes up against taking that money from other people, building your board up ahead of those others, hitting the top of the leaderboard as well. So go and get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or on Google Play. Okay, so who's the next buy low, sell high that we're going to look at? This one to me was weird and wild. Well, all of them are, because I had certain expectations and it didn't get lived up to. In the preseason, I looked at the numbers and went, why are we projecting Zack LaVine so low? Why is his ADP so low? What is going on here? I don't get it. I had LaVine 37th. He had an ADP of 50. I thought that's around too low at least. LaVine is a mid to high 20 scorer who hits threes, who gets a solid amount of assists, who's not inefficient, even though we might think that he is, who played 77 games despite having a knee problem the year before. I go, all right, what are we missing here? Well, apparently everything, because he finished 73rd. He finished 70 in points leagues, averaging 32.95. And what obviously happened is the man did not care. He wanted out of Chicago. I don't blame him. Chicago also should have wanted him out of there, but they didn't move on from him. He had some injuries that looked sus in terms of, hey, can you trade me? Oh, my foot's sore. Then he came back and then had to have surgery on that foot again. If you have to have surgery on your foot, there's a legit problem on the foot. I know that. I'm not saying that he's faking that injury. It just looks sus when it happened. But when he played, he didn't care. And this man is one of the worst defenders in the NBA, but somehow he got worse. Somehow he took it to another level. Offensively, he didn't care. He couldn't shoot. Nothing seemed to work in any way for LaVine, who'd been a relatively consistent player. He averaged under 20 points a game despite playing 35 minutes. He averaged under 4 assists. He shot just 45% from the field. What did he shoot? Under 35 from 3. Just a horrific overall season. And that's not even including the fact that how many games did he even play? I can't even find the game. 25. The bloke played 25 games. We can talk about LaMelo Ball and his games missed and how frustrating that is. 25 games have been played. That is an extraordinarily low number. And I just don't know what happens now. Does he go back to the trade request in the summer? Do the Bulls move on? They should, will they? I don't know. I find it hard to believe that LaVine could be worse than this. Because that's like he's never been that bad of a player to have that bad shooting, that low scoring, invisible steals, assists dropping down. He's not a good player, don't get me wrong. He's a guy that's inflated in terms of value, but he's not this bad. So that was a bad call from him. I didn't know that he was going to be requesting a trade and he would go completely half-assed basically all season. But there you have it. He was a guy that was like, this 50 doesn't make any sense as the ADP. I'm going to grab him at the start of the fourth. Fine. He's consistent there. I get assists, points, threes, great free throws, good field goals for a guy of that sort of a player. Bang, here we are. No, we're not there at all because he was bad. And then he missed time on top of it, which again is not even what I'm factoring into this, the fact that he missed all those games. That's not why this is a miss, because he missed games. Because, again, you can't predict that stuff. You can't predict that LaVine would have had foot surgery. You just can't do it. So that's not why it was bad. It was bad because he was just bad. This next one, though, is one where I was like, I did not realize that my -1 rankings put this guy in this spot, nor did I realize that his ADP was actually in this spot. So, and I'll cop to this. I've told you so many times through all of the season, all of the preseason, all of the off-season, how I was like, I'm actually out on Walker Kessler. There are people who will argue black and blue in the face with me, telling me, no, you get him and you just win blocks everywhere. I said, absolutely false. You just don't. That is a lie. That is not true. Now, we can rehab that argument with Victor Wembanyama, and I said, well, maybe you actually do with him. But with Kessler, that was never true, and it was a bad argument, and I was correct. There were people who would be like, I'm taking Kessler in the second round. The ability to win blocks is huge, and I made so many arguments against Kessler, saying, hey, look at this guy. He's got these great field goals. Great rebounds, strong blocks. But he's like bottom 5 out of the top 200 players in like 4 categories. Bad, like bottom 5 in threes, bottom 5 in assists, bottom 5 in steal rate, bottom 5 in free throw percentage, which is so hard to come back from. And I go, these guys who suffer these big spikes in these low volume categories like rebounds, or not rebounds, like blocks, and the big man stats get hyper inflated. And I saw him go in a lot of spots really early, but apparently his ADP was 52. It doesn't sound right to me. That doesn't sound like where it was. So I'm not really sure what's actually going on there. Very intriguing. I had him 39th in the preseason with my -1 ranks. Again, I thought that he was going at the start of round 3, maybe round 2 in a lot of drafts. So the 39 to me, I actually thought I had him at 50. But again, that's where the -1 had him. But I remember doing mock drafts and saying, like, I'm not really confident taking him even in round 4. I would have taken him in the 50s, even though my projection put him there. So that's a weird one for me. That happens sometimes. His ADP was 52. He ended up 102nd. He averaged 26 fantasy points with 129th ranking. The blocks were still pretty solid from Kessler. And we know these low volume stats can vary quite a bit, but it wasn't that. It was like the Jazz just lost faith. And I had no ability to look at this. It's also, we talked about fading Mikal Bridges the other day, and we're talking about how Walker Kessler was a bust. This is worth remembering. When you talk about Team USA and you talk about international competition, and the general narrative is blokes who play in those teams, they get to be around elite competition with these elite guys, getting this great mindset, blah, 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 and they're going to turn in gigantic seasons the next season. Almost everybody on Team USA did not do that. Austin Reeves did not take a step forward. Bridges sucked. Brunson took a step forward, absolutely. Halliburton took a step forward, then a step back. Cam Johnson, what are we talking about? Just a situation where, again, those overarching narratives they're just not right. They just don't work. Dennis Schroeder, MVP of Euro Cup, or what was it? Eurobasket. How good was he? The answer is not. So I think we can't go in and say that playing in those international tournaments means you're going to be worse, because you could easily make the argument, oh, they're super tired, but then you had Luka Doncic who put up big numbers. In the end, it just doesn't do anything. It's got no predictive ability and nothing that we should pay attention to. There was another guy who went bananas in that. Franz Wagner, another one. Like, cool. Like, was he great? Like, not really. He was fine, but he didn't take big steps forward. Anyway, Walker Kessler on that team, just cool. Again, that's back to the overall point, though, with the Jazz, is they just seem out on him. I did not... Now, is that because he suffered an elbow injury in game 1, missed all that time, and just couldn't get back in action? End of the season with a nasal fracture, didn't play. Or they just like, I think he's too limited here, guys. He just can't do enough stuff. He's good at the one thing that he does, but it's got no offensive game, no passing, no real switchability onto the outside. And Will Hardy wants that. So it does seem like a pretty strong change in philosophy from Utah. But I'm not going to rule out that Kessler comes back and plays 29 minutes next game. Or next season. I would never project him at 30. I think going at 25 minutes probably makes sense. But I'm not going to rule it out completely. But it was a gigantic downturn. And it's worth remembering that the guys whose traditional fantasy algorithms bump them so high up the rankings, you got to be really cautious of relying upon those 2-3 individual categories that push you way up. And that's exactly what happened to Kessler, in addition to the fact that Jazz is saying, nah, we're out. And I don't know what that means. With John Collins and Taylor Hendricks there, is Hendricks and Kessler the combination they go with? Maybe. Do they need to go with Hendricks and Markin as their 4-5? Probably, yeah, but they don't have a 3 on the roster. So his future is very much, or his future as a fantasy high-end asset is very, very much up in the air at this point. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It is playoff time in the NBA, as you know. We've seen a lot of Game 2, some excellent games on, what day was it? Monday across the NBA with buzzer beaters and comebacks and crazy endgame sequences. You can bet on all that stuff, including NHL playoffs, the baseball season as well. It's all there over on FanDuel to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs and slam dunks. All of it that's on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Get stuff off your chest, right? You can be sitting there, you can be watching the Jazz and go, why are you playing John Collins over Walker Kessler? Why are you doing this? And they might say, we've got our reasons. You go, but that doesn't help my fantasy team. And then sitting in a room, they go, bro, who cares? No one cares about your fantasy team. But it might frustrate you, understandably. So, talking to someone neutral in your life can be a really useful thing. That's not what therapy has to be. It's not what therapy is all about. But it's one thing that you can do. Finding a way to get stuff off your chest. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than what's happening with Walker Kessler on our fantasy team. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right, so Kessler was the weird one where I didn't realize that I was ahead of ADP on him. That's cool. That's my bad. Even though I'm pretty sure all of my words would suggest I'm not interested in him. I didn't realize that I had him there. So there you go. Let's move on to the next one. This is another one that I think we got a little screwed on from information that we didn't know to begin the season, and that's Brad Beal. Beal was sliding down draft boards a lot. And one of my major things that I talk about with big threes, with big 3 usage guys joining together, is that the first and second guy are usually okay. The third guy takes a big hit. Beal has had borderline first-round seasons before in Washington. He was never going to do that in Phoenix, and I was very clear that he was not going to be the point guard. That was my take on it, despite what Shams told you. That was very much my take on it, and I was correct. I had him bumped way down. I had him at 49th. But Yahoo's ADP had him at 61. I thought that was a real bargain. Okay, look, I have got him scaled way back. But they've also got nobody else. And then, of course, he didn't play to start the season with a back injury that we didn't know about, that they didn't tell us about, that they didn't describe accurately at all in the preseason. And then once he came back, he was hobbled. He played limited minutes. He hurt his ankle again. He just wasn't himself. Towards the end of the year, we started to get the Bradley Beal that would have made sense to pick at 49. So while it was wrong, because he ended 63rd at the end of the season, it's not a gigantic miss, but it is a miss. Not a gigantic miss, but I think if he hadn't have had that back injury, or if I'd have known about that back problem, I wouldn't have had him projected to play as many minutes as I did. I'm going to just check how many minutes did I actually have Brad Beal projected to play, because I think I had him at like 35 minutes a game. Yeah. I wouldn't have had him at 35 minutes a game, I don't think, had I known that there was an issue with his back. What did he end up playing per game this year? 33. Yeah, that would have made more sense. And then I would have had him around that 60 mark. It would have been bang on. But we didn't know. And you can say, well, he was injured a lot in Washington. Cool. Again, this stuff doesn't translate over. It's not the same thing. Was it last season or the year before that he missed because he hurt his wrist, which has nothing to do with his back? Wasn't he a guy that played 3 years in a row of 82 games in a row? Like, yes. So, again, a miss, not a bad one. Would have loved to have known the issue with his back that was there that stopped him playing opening night. Again, they just didn't tell us about it. So that would have been great. But overall, an L. 32.94 fantasy points, ranked him 71st. Again, I think most of that projection was close. We had the usage down. We had him not playing as a point guard. We had him improving his three-point shooting. All of that stuff was correct. Just the minutes were off because I didn't know that he was going to suffer that injury and then come back and sprain his ankle and have like your multiple setbacks to begin the year. But an L nonetheless. And Beal's back hamstring zone now is becoming more of a problem. And that's where you start to get into the situation where I talk about injuries a lot and you can't predict them. You can't predict Zack LaVine would hurt his foot and have surgery. You can't. But when you have recurrent issues with a body part, Porzingis' knee, and now Beal's, the in phrase at the moment, posterior chain, back to hamstring, that does become a problem. And we also heard at the start of the season, this back problem, he had this back issue all through last season in Washington, which nobody had never come out, which again would have been great information for us to know. Probably would have been good information for Phoenix to know, to be honest, before the trade went down. But that also came out. So if I had have known, hey, this guy's got a persistent back problem, then it would have been like, I don't know about that. Maybe we're going to push those 35 minutes down. But that's hindsight. Didn't know. Got it wrong. There you are. The next one, Cade Cunningham. I was pretty big on Cade. I still am pretty big on Cade. I think there's just a unbelievable amount of irrational hate about Cade Cunningham that just makes no sense to me whatsoever. The Pistons have put terrible lineups around him basically the whole time he's been there. He missed a big chunk of year 2 with the stress reaction in his leg. He missed the end of this season with a knee injury that he did come back from, but there was no need to play him down the end, so that made complete sense. But there are people out there that will go and tell you that Cade Cunningham's not a rosterable player in 12-team leagues, which is like clearly false, like very clearly false. I had Cade 28th, and what I did say about Cade is I said, if everything goes completely right and we get this gigantic third-year breakout, there is back-end first-round potential. That is not me saying Cade Cunningham's a first-round player, take him there. That's saying we look at guys and we go, do you have the ability to become a first-round player? Does Cade have the ability to be a 27-point guy with 5 rebounds, 7.8, 8 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.6 blocks, shooting 44, 89, 40% from 3. Like, yes, I believe that, yes, that is very clearly the upside that Cade has. He didn't hit it. Now, was he way off? Not really. Well, was he way off where I project him? Not really. Again, when I talk head-to-head, I'm always going to be telling you how I look at things with the -1 numbers. Cade, I had projected 28th. He finished 41st. 41st. There will be a cohort of people that will tell you that Cade was a gigantic bust and he was unrosterable and he was wherever. I'm going to check what the Yahoo rankings actually had him at, because you'll see that he's pushed down to, like, he's going to become my new Delon Wright, was better at fantasy than Giannis, or Rob Williams is better than Luka from 2 years ago. This might become this one when we're trying to look at rankings and go, well, that's very, very, very clearly false, so maybe you shouldn't be using those numbers for any sort of argument. That's where I'm going to be at with Cade. So I'm going to have a look where he was. Yeah, 82nd on those, on the Yahoo straight per game numbers. 82nd. Which is just not like a reliable, it just doesn't reflect reality. Like, would you say that Tyus Jones had a better season than him? Would you say that Keegan Murray was better than Cade? I'm going to look at some names here. Would you say Alex Caruso was a better fantasy player than Cade this season? Would you say that Nikola Vucevic was a better player than Cade this season? I wouldn't to any of those. But I had him 28th. He finished 41st. His ADP was 35, so I was ahead of ADP. I was never suggesting to take him in the first round. I was okay with getting him at the turn, the like 25, 26 pick of the third round with ability to go higher. But then that Pistons team was unbelievably worse than... Okay, I thought they wouldn't hit their over-under, but I didn't think they'd be this bad. No one did. You couldn't have thought this. You couldn't have said, yes, they will be the worst team of all time, which they were close to. And Monty Williams would be the worst coach of all time. We did predict that Troy Weaver would be the worst GM of all time, which we've known for 4 years. But that is just bad stuff from Cade. Interestingly, Cade beat his ADP in points leagues, 39.43. That was 34th. He was 35 in ADP. He actually beat it there. So overall, yes, he was a little bit lower than my projections. He wasn't that far off. But it's an L. I'll take that L. I still firmly believe in Cade, and I think he is still going to have... What an interesting question this is going to be. For fantasy, do you think... I don't know how I think of this. I don't think I actually believe this. But I don't think you can rule it out that in the next couple of seasons that Cade Cunningham is better than Anthony Edwards for fantasy. I don't think you can rule that out. It was pretty close this season. If I have a look at the numbers, it was pretty close because Edwards was a guy that was going at pick 15. That's where his ADP was. I think I had him at 23 or whatever it was. But yeah, I wonder... I'm just going to have a look at where they were. So Cade was 41 in -1. Where is Edwards? Oh, Edwards was high. He was in the 30th. There you go, 30th. So he was better. But I wouldn't rule out that Cade can have a better season than Edwards at some point. Not sure that I think it's likely, but I'm not going to rule that out. We're going to finish our main section of guys that I was higher on than ADP that missed with a couple of players from my Orlando Magic. Because I thought that Markelle Fultz would be guaranteed to be the starting point guard, that he would build on the improvements that he showed last season, and he would be a strong late-round source of high field goals for a point guard, good assists, very strong assists, really good steals. He was... ADP sat at 95. I had him 84th in the preseason. Well... Yuck! He was 249th. What is this shit? Oh my God. For points leagues, he averaged 18.6 points. That's 219th. Again, I know that Markelle Fultz has had a lot of knee problems. He had an ACL injury, of course. The knee problem for Fultz wasn't why he had the issues in Philly. That wasn't what derailed the start of his career. So we can't sit here and act like Fultz has had knee problems for years and years and years. He had a torn ACL. And then the season before, 22-23, his season was delayed because of a toe issue, not a knee. And then we played one game and then 2 games, I think, to start the year. In warm-ups, got pulled out with knee soreness, and that was it. He missed weeks with nebulous designations with no updates. He came back, then he would miss weeks again. And by that time, he was a shell of himself. The team had moved on, and he just doesn't look the same player at all. So... just a huge L. I loved getting him late. Loved it. Look at this. Starting point guard. 29 minutes. 16 points. 6 assists, let's say. 5 rebounds. 1.4 steals. Love it. High field goals. Doesn't take any threes. Improved his free throws. And just completely died as a player. I hope he can get back to it. I'm not convinced that he does. Really, really bad stuff. And the other one was another Orlando Magic player. And that's Wendell Carter Jr. Carter started out the season really slow. And then he ended up having an injury that, again, was what's your actual injury? Just missing time with his knee injury. Goga Badadze came in, played really well. A lot of people were suggesting that Goga would remain the starting center. Clearly didn't happen. I never thought there was any chance of that happening, but it clearly didn't happen. But even when Carter returned, he just wasn't the same guy. We have seen years of Wendell Carter. Years. When I say years, that sounds like I'm saying 10 years. It's not. I mean 1 or 2. So bad for me to misphrase that. We have seen Wendell Carter be a solid enough top, let's say 90 player, 28 minutes a night, scores a little bit, gets some rebounds. The blocks have gone down since his days in Chicago, but solid enough assists, hit some threes, be okay. Not be spectacular, not be high upside, but be fine as a later round center. And he was just not good. I had him 90th in the preseason. His ADP was 105, so that's not gigantically off. It is over a round off, but he finished 168th. So even when he got his minutes back at the end of the year, after that shaky start where he was hurt for a period of time and then he was coming off the bench and then his minutes were low, and then at the end of the year he lost his minutes again to John Isaac. When he was on the court, he just was bad. Usage was down. Shooting wasn't there. Didn't get the defensive stats back. He just sucked. His points, 24 fantasy points, which is 146, nowhere near where you needed to be there. So they were two bad picks from the Magic, who, and again, the Magic exceeded their expectations. We'll see what happens for them in the playoffs. Not looking good at the moment. Their offense is a disaster. But these are two guys I thought rock solid starters, rock solid role, rock solid low upside but high floor players in that 80 to 100 zone, and they both absolutely flopped through weird non-disclose what is actually happening with your injury at the start of the year, and they never recovered from it, and they just were bad when they were on the court anyway. So big L's from me and big L's from those guys. Some other names that I think are worth mentioning that I just wasn't right on. Had Bruce Brown higher than ADP. I wasn't massively in on Brown. I didn't think that he would have anywhere near the same role in Indiana that he had in Denver, and that was playing as a point guard. But I thought that his minutes were secure. I thought that he'd get 32 minutes a night. They paid him a lot of money that he would start. He'd play 32, 33 minutes, and the drop-off in assist rate would be neutralized by the extra minutes, giving him extra steals, the nice blocks, some scoring responsibility. I thought all that would come, and he was just bad. He struggled with his shooting. He struggled. The passing wasn't there, so I was correct on that part of it, but they didn't give him big minutes, and then they traded him to Toronto, and his role there was up and down, and he just sucked. So just a bad read on Bruce Brown. Chris Paul, I had about 65. His ADP was around 73. I thought that, yes, it's not a great spot here for Paul. I don't know whether he's going to start or not. I thought they would start him, and then maybe they would make an adjustment later in the season, but they didn't. His value fluctuated, and it was strong when Draymond didn't play, and then when Draymond did play, Paul played like 23 minutes off the bench and was basically unrosterable. So, yeah, that didn't work out. I did not think that Chris Paul, who was saying, there was all this talk about, no, he's not going to come off the bench. He's going to start. Of course, he's going to start. It's Chris Paul will make it work, blah, blah, blah. Well, he didn't start. They didn't make it work, and he was bad. And the cliff came. And maybe this the lessons to learn here is, again, the decline cliff for NBA players is 29. Not true. Again, let me rephrase that. The beginning of the decline is age 29. That's not necessarily the cliff. That's the beginning of the decline. Basically, every player, always going to be some exceptions, but if you plotted every player's advanced stats, career graph, age 29 is where the bump is, and it starts to go down. Now, the good players can keep it high, and it goes down with a small gradient. The bad players will go up and come down. The good players will stay high, and then we get a big dip later on. Chris Paul, age 37, I think he is. Well, we've seen the decline the last 2-3 years in pretty big drops, and we saw a bigger one this season. So I think that's part of it, and it's part of why we've faded LeBron for many years ago. Like at this point, at some point, there's going to be a drop-off. There hasn't really been for him, but at some point there will be for all these guys. And we saw it again. We saw it with Steph this season. So when we talk about guys over 35, I think we've got to bake in a huge downside risk that at that age, stuff just disappears. It's hard to project it. It's hard to come in and say, well, you shot 50% and averaged 18 points, but now you'll have 6% less usage and not hit any shots. It's hard to go in and say that. But all of the data would suggest that when we get to this age, the chances of that happening keep getting higher and the downside risk keeps increasing. That's a lesson. Zach Collins, I had around 100. I was right that they were going to start him at center next to Victor Wembanyama. Bang on. And he had some struggles initially with some shooting, but in 28 to 30 minutes a night, Zach Collins at around that spot would have been absolute money. But they benched him. Victor Wembanyama started at center. Collins went to being a backup. All she wrote. Now he suffered a torn labrum at the end of the season, so he's going to have surgery again. And that's done. I thought we would get longer of Zach starting at center next to Wembanyama, meaning he would have pretty strong numbers. Wouldn't have the same numbers that he had the year before when he replaced Jakob Poeltl, where he was a top 40, top 50 player. That's why we had him at 100. But the benching of him to move Wembanyama up happened earlier than I expected. Had Mitchell Robinson higher than he ended up. I didn't think that he would suffer this significant ankle injury, but that's not even baked into that. Some of it is, I guess, with the minutes, but he just was way worse than expectations. Way worse. Aaron Gordon, also. Yes, I'm not even counting the free throw numbers, but he just lost out on other stuff. His counting stats dropped. His field goal percentage dropped, which is really the big driver of his value. he went from a guy that was like a solid like top 105-ish player in a punt free throw scenario to a guy that I'm not sure that you wanted to roster him all through the year. It's not a huge L, that one, but it was. And the last one is, I don't even remember this one, like Rob Williams. I had him projected inside the top 100 per game. Now, I never would have taken him there because he was coming in and playing ostensibly behind DeAndre Ayton, but the talk was that they would play a little bit together, that we would get a situation that, there's at least the 18, 17 minutes that Ayton doesn't play at center. Williams would get him. We get a little bit of crossover with him at the 4, or Ayton at the 4, however you want to put it. He gets 25 minutes, and that is a top 100 player. We've seen Rob Williams in 25 minutes do that. Well, that didn't happen. They didn't really play together, and then he got hurt in 5 minutes. And at this point, we just cannot risk Robert Williams in any sort of fantasy situation because his knees are in real trouble. And again, that backup role is just not high enough. It's a little bit different to playing backup with Al Horford because they can play together. Ayton and Williams, I'm not really sure that it works. But I had a little bit of confidence in taking him because the upside, if he got 25, 26 minutes, well, he would smash the number I actually had him at. How many minutes did I actually project Rob Williams at? That is a good question. Because that'll give me an idea of what I actually thought and how crazy it was. 23 only. That's not that high. Hey, but 23, it's way too high. But, it obviously did not work out. I think I had his block rate projected too high as well. And not really, 1.5. Had his field goals too high at 73%. Maybe that's it. That's part of the problem there. So, that was a bad one as well. That was only a later pick that you invested in, but I was ahead of ADP there, and it did not work out. But what has worked out is this show, I hope. That is the end of it. And, again, I could very easily not do this show. I could very easily not tell you the things that I got wrong and be non-transparent. Pretty much everything I do is transparent, though. You see it all on Basketball Monster when you remember. I do a million shows all season. You can go and find stuff, mock drafts, all that sort of thing. And this stuff is important for me to talk about. There will be plenty of people who are critics of mine, and that's fine, who said Josh just never, ever admits that he's wrong, never talks about those things, which, again, is blatantly false. So for those people, this one's for you. And it's not about giving an excuse as to why you got something wrong, because what do you want me to tell you? I'm terrible and it's wrong. Right? That doesn't help anybody. With the ones you get right, with the ones you get wrong, it's important to know why you got them right, why you got them wrong. Could you have done something differently there? How do you view that as we move on to the next one? And for anything that you either agreed with me on, disagreed with me on, you got right, I got right, you made a mistake in whatever you did or you got right, it's not useful to say, well, I actually told you that this was wrong or this was right, or sit there and go, look how good I was or look how bad I was. It's about looking through it and going, why was I so off on this? What did I miss? How did I get this wrong? And how do I change that for the future? Does my valuation of these guys adjust? That's the important part when we're talking fantasy. It's not about, I got this one right, I'm an absolute legend. It's about, was it luck? Was I smarter than them because of information or the way I viewed things? I don't know, whatever it is. Understanding why is more important than understanding what happened. Not even what happened. The result is important, but it's less important than why the result happened. Maybe I'll get that tattooed across my neck. Go and thumb it up. Go and double bang. Maybe you don't want to double bang because I got these ones wrong. Maybe you're just a single bang because Josh screwed you. Maybe do that. No, I'm being an idiot. Go thumb it up. Leave your comments. I love all you guys that are still here watching. And again, the vast majority of people are entirely respectful and understand the process of doing all this and understanding why we get things right or wrong. And respectful disagreements are always welcome because I learn things from you. Hopefully you learn things from me. And hopefully, in the end, we'll just have some fun together. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.